Hey everyone, Dr. Rowe coming to you from SpineCare in St. Joseph, Michigan. So if you're dealing with stiff, achy hips that are locked up and just don't want to move, definitely check this video out. I'm going to go over easy exercises that you can use throughout the day to quickly lubricate or loosen stiff hips. It's kind of like breaking through rust. A quick note, each one of these exercises works just a little bit differently. They're going to target different muscles. To get the best results, go through them all and use what gives you the most relief. With that being said, let's get started. This is what I call the Trifecta Stretch. It's a combination of 3 different movements that can quickly bring blood flow in, lubricate stiff hips, and the great part is you can do this first thing in the morning. Let's start lying flat on our back. The first movement is called the windshield wiper. You want your knees bent, your feet and legs roughly hip width apart, and I like to take my heels and just gently press them down into the bed or the floor with my toes pointed upward. From here, I'm going to take my knees and I'm going to swing them towards one side. You really want to focus on trying to move through your hips as much as possible. Keep your back as flat as possible. As you take your knees down, you're going to feel a deep stretch on the outer part of one side's hip while you feel a deep stretch on the inner part of the other. Just build into this as much as you can. Hold it comfortably for a second or two, and then just like a windshield wiper, you're going to go towards the other side and repeat. Do this nice and slowly for 10 to 15 repetitions. And with each repetition, try to build into it a little bit more. So now let's focus on another movement called the butterfly. For this one, we're going to put our feet together and just gently press our heels downward into the bed. At this point, you should feel a light stretch forming on the outside of your hips, but this is how we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to take our knees and just wing them downward towards the floor as much as we can until we feel a deep but comfortable stretch forming on the inner part of our thighs that works towards the groin into the hips. Once we feel that, we're going to hold this for a second or two, and then we're going to slowly bring our knees together. Now, like a butterfly flapping and swings, you're going to go down and up like this for 10 to 15 repetitions. And again, with each repetition, try to build into it just a little bit more. So the last movement is a personal favorite for many. It's called the corkscrew, and this one puts a lot more movement into the lower back, and it can offer a satisfying self-pop, crack, or release, but don't try to force it with this one. So what I'm going to do is start with the most painful or stiff side. Like let's say I have a lot of stiffness and pain on my right hip. What you're going to do with the other leg is straighten it like this, while the painful side, that side's knee is bent at 90 degrees, knee straight up towards the ceiling. Take your hand on the other side and just grip right on the outside of your knee, and now just pull that knee across your body. With the first part of this stretch, I like to just focus on the outer part of my hip, over the glutes, the buttocks. Once I feel that, I hold this comfortably for about 5 seconds and then release it. On the next repetition though, I'm going to go a little bit more with it until I feel that stretch work from my hip into my lower back. Once I feel that, I again hold it for 5 seconds, release it, and then just keep repeating this 5 to 10 times. And again, with each repetition, try to build into it just a little bit more. And then from there, just switch to the other side and repeat to help keep everything in balance. But when you do this, you're probably going to find that one certain movement just helps you the most, or it just feels like it's attacking the most tightness or stiffness. At that point, treat it like a relief position and keep building into it more and more through repetitions until everything is nice and loose. So if most of your hip stiffness and pain is noticed after going from a seated to a standing position, definitely give this exercise a try. It's called a wall sit. We're going to go next to a smooth wall or a door and just start off by placing your whole backside flush against it for support. So the next thing that we're going to do is put our feet out in front of us. That way we can lean our whole body weight into the door or the wall. You want your feet a little bit wider than your hips to target the hips a little bit more, and just point your toes out slightly to take tension off the knees. So the next thing, and this is pretty straightforward, we're just going to bend our knees and now sit downward as far as we can. The further that you take your butt towards the floor, the more that you're going to feel a deep activation into the leg muscles and also into the glutes around the hips. This really helps strengthen our legs, which is always a good thing. But don't go to the point of any pain or discomfort. Just feel a really good activation into those muscles and then hold this for about 3 to 5 seconds and then quickly drive up like this, just using your leg strength. From here, you can take a breather, but I would recommend trying to do this pretty quickly because it will help just stimulate the cardiovascular system, get some blood flow in and lubricate those stiff hips. So I just like to do this roughly about 10 to 15 times, and with each repetition just going down a little bit further. Afterwards, take a breather. If it feels like you have a little bit more energy, always challenge yourself by throwing in another set or two. This is just a wonderful strengthening exercise that'll make everyday activities like walking, getting out of a chair, or going up and down stairs a little bit easier to do. Here's a really easy way to lubricate and loosen stiff hips in a chair. The first thing that we want to do is scoot a little bit more towards the edge of a chair, and then we're going to have our legs roughly hip width apart, knees bent at 90 degrees, and you're going to place all of your leg weight right onto the balls of your feet. So lift your heels upward as much as you can until you feel a really good activation around the calf muscles. We're going to hold this and now take our hands and grip onto our armrest if your chair has armrest. If not, just grab right onto the edge of the seat. But you want to do a slow marching motion like this, driving your knees upward towards your chest. The key with this though is to drive your knee above your hips, because the further that you go up, the more that you're going to feel a deep activation of the muscles right here on the top of the thigh. That would be the hip flexors, which are a big instigator of both hip and groin pain. So we're going to just march that knee up, hold it for a brief second, and then do it on the other side. I like to do this about 15 times on both sides, and then from there, relax, take a breather. At this point, you should start to feel some blood flow coming in to the hips and the legs, which is always a good thing. So on the next repetition though, we're going to switch things up. Instead of placing all of our weight onto the balls of our feet, we're going to place it onto our heels and then lift our toes upward towards the ceiling as much as we can, and then we're going to repeat this. You're going to notice it hits the muscles just a little bit differently. Again, about 15 repetitions, take a breather and relax. See how you feel. If it feels like you have a little bit more energy, challenge yourself by throwing in another set or two. So the next movement is going to help target the glutes, the buttocks, which is the biggest instigator of both hip and back pain. For this one, we're going to start with the most stiff or painful side. Like let's say I have a lot going on in my right hip. You want to take that side's ankle and place over your other side's knee. So when you look down, it should look like a figure four. I know a lot of people are going to have difficulty getting into this position, so to make it a little bit easier, straighten the other side like this and place your ankle over the other side's shin. That way you can grab your pant leg or in front of the shin and just slide it up into position. So the first movement that I like to do is a deep stretch into the glutes. So just take your hands, cup around your knee, and what you're going to do is pull this bent knee across your body towards the other side's shoulder. So I'm taking my right knee towards my left shoulder. As you do this, you're going to feel a really deep stretch form on the outside of your thigh that works towards the hip. Once you feel it into the hip, you're just going to hold this for 20 to 30 seconds, release it, and then repeat this 3 to 5 times. And with each repetition, just try to build into it a little bit more. So if you would like to take this one to the next level and get what is known as an active stretch to work those muscles a little bit more and hopefully lubricate them a little bit more, you can do this instead. So what I'm going to do with this bent knee is I'm going to press it straight down towards the floor, but I'm not going to use my hands. Instead, just use your leg and hip strength. The more that you press down, the more that you're going to feel a deep activation into the glutes around the hip. So just go for a deep, comfortable activation of those muscles. 5-second hold, release it, and then repeat that 5 to 10 times. And with each repetition, try to build into it a little bit more. Just remember though, whatever you do on one side, switch to the other side and repeat to help keep everything in balance. With this exercise, we're going to focus a little bit more on hip rotation. That is taking the hip out and in, two movements that become very stiff and achy, especially with hip arthritis. For this one, we just need something long and sturdy. A broomstick works perfectly, but you can also use something like a PVC pipe. So let's start with the hip that has the most stiffness or pain. What you're going to do is straighten the other leg out like this, and then what you're going to do is bend that side's knee at 90 degrees, knee straight up towards the ceiling. Take your stick and just place it right behind your knee and kind of fish it forward to the point where it's also wrapped around the front of your foot. I should say around the top of your foot. That way we now have a lever that we can use to put our hip into rotation, but also control the depth of this stretch. So the first movement that I'm going to focus on doing is just taking the end of the stick and pressing it outward. What this will do is slowly turn your hip into external rotation, so it takes it outward. Just keep building into this until you feel a deep but comfortable stretch around the hip. You're going to hold this for 5 seconds and then release it. On the next repetition, we're going to go in the other direction, pressing the end inward. This puts the hip into internal rotation. Again, you'll feel a really deep stretch around the hip, but it'll feel a little bit different. And just hold this for 5 seconds and then repeat this in both directions about 5 to 10 times. And with each repetition, just build into it a little bit more. Afterwards, see how you feel. If it feels like it's helping out, but there's still some stiffness left, just keep repeating this over and over again until everything is nice and loose or you're not getting any more improvement. Just remember though, whatever you do on one side, switch the other side and repeat to keep everything in balance. So one of the best ways to loosen and strengthen your hips is by doing what are called clamshells and scissors. For this one, we're going to start lying on our side in bed or on a floor. You always want to start with the most painful side first, so have that side facing towards the ceiling. So in this case, I'm going to demonstrate what to do for left-sided hip pain. You also want to support your head during this exercise with your hand. The first one is called the clamshells. It's a little bit easier to do than the scissors. So let's start with this one. We're going to bend our knees roughly at 90 degrees and keep our feet together. Now with this top knee, what we're going to do is just wing it upward towards the ceiling as much as we can. You should start to feel a deep activation of the muscles on the inner part of your thigh, working into the groin, but more importantly, into the hip. Once you feel it into the hip, hold this comfortably for about 3 to 5 seconds and then slowly lower your leg back down. But fight your leg weight. It's going to hit the muscles a little bit differently. But do this nice and slowly for about 10 to 15 repetitions, and with each repetition, try to build into it a little bit more. From there, you're going to switch sides and repeat to help keep everything in balance. But afterwards, see how you feel. If it feels like you have a little bit more energy, challenge yourself by throwing in another set or 2. But if you would like to take this one to the next level and make it a little bit harder, you can do what is called the scissor. It's pretty similar, but this time around, we're going to have our knees straight and our body in a nice straight line. With this top leg, we're going to keep that knee straight and we're just going to raise our foot upward towards the ceiling as much as we can, kind of like opening scissors. So with this one, you should feel a deep activation into the glutes around the hip. I really feel it over the cheek area. Hold this 3 to 5 seconds and then slowly lower your leg weight down, again fighting it as much as you can. Do this nice and slowly for 10 to 15 repetitions. Switch to the other side and repeat to keep everything in balance. But again, if it feels like you have a little bit more energy, always challenge yourself by throwing in another set or 2. If the exercises help, please support the channel by giving this video a like and maybe subscribing too. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.